My dad growled, "Your brother needs your truck, so sign it over before dinner and be grateful." I tossed the insurance cancellation notice at him and said, "Too bad. I already pulled my name off everything and reported the mileage fraud." The first thing I remember is how quiet the house got when my dad realized I was not bluffing. Not quiet in the normal way. Not the kind where everybody stops talking because they are waiting for the mashed potatoes. It was the kind of quiet that happens when somebody who is used to getting their way suddenly understands they have lost control of the room. My dad was still standing in the kitchen with his hand half raised, like he had been about to grab the paper from me. My brother Caleb was sitting at the table with his jaw hanging open. My mom had gone pale in a way I had never seen before, and for one second I actually thought she might sit down on the floor. I had gone over there expecting a stupid family dinner, and maybe some guilt trips. I had not expected the whole thing to blow up in under 10 seconds. I had definitely not expected the insurance notice in my truck glove box to become the thing that finally made my dad shut up. But I am getting ahead of myself. I need to start earlier, because none of this happened out of nowhere. If you had asked me 6 months before that dinner whether my family was complicated, I probably would have said yes and then downplayed it. That is what I always did. I told myself my dad was old school. I told myself my brother was just having a rough time. I told myself my mom stayed quiet because she hated conflict. That was the story I kept in my head because it was easier than admitting the truth. The truth was that my family had spent years treating me like the responsible one, the one who would always clean up after everybody else, and I had let them do it because I thought that was what being the good son meant. I was 32, worked full-time as a field service tech for a commercial refrigeration company, and I had spent the last 8 years slowly building my life around being dependable. That mattered because I did a job where people did not care if you were tired or sick or stuck in traffic. If a walk-in cooler died at 7 o'clock a.m. in August, you showed up. If a restaurant owner was losing inventory, you showed up. If a warehouse manager was panicking because product was warming up, you showed up. I was good at it because I had learned to keep records, keep schedules, and not let anyone bully me into skipping steps just because they were impatient. That habit ended up saving me. At the time, though, I was just trying to keep my truck running and my life separate from my family. The truck was the one thing I was actually proud of. It was a 2017 Ford F-150 that I had bought used after years of driving junkers. Nothing fancy. Gray, regular cab, a little beat up in the bed, but clean, dependable, and paid off except for a small balance I was hammering down early. I used it for work and for my side jobs on weekends when I did handyman stuff for neighbors and friends. I put a lot into that truck. New tires, a fresh battery, regular oil changes. I kept every receipt in a folder in my home office. That folder mattered later too. Caleb, my younger brother, was the opposite of me in every way that stressed my dad out. He had the charm, the excuses, and the talent for making every problem sound temporary. At 28, he had bounced between jobs for years. He was never officially a deadbeat in the dramatic sense people imagine. He worked, just not long enough to stabilize anything. He would start at a warehouse, leave because the hours were bad. He would try delivery driving, quit because his car was unreliable. He would take a contracting job, blow through the first few paychecks, and then suddenly need a loan because rent was due. My dad always believed Caleb just needed one more chance. What he really needed was consequences, but my dad had never been the type to confuse the two. I was the opposite kind of son. I was the one who got called when something needed to be fixed. If Mom needed a ride to a doctor appointment, she asked me. If Dad needed help moving something heavy, he asked me. If Caleb needed money, Dad asked me to spot him because according to him, I was the only one who could afford it without hurting. That was only partly true. I could afford it because I lived carefully. I kept a budget. I did not go out much. I did not buy toys. I did not have kids. I did not have a house yet, but I was saving for one. Every time I said no to something fun, I told myself it was because I was being smart. What I did not want to admit was that my family had already counted on me being the fallback, and they were comfortable with that. The first real sign something was off came in late spring. Caleb called me out of nowhere and asked if he could borrow my truck for a couple of days because his car was supposedly in the shop. That had happened before. I had loaned him my truck once when he needed to haul furniture for a move. I had regretted it because he brought it back with the gas light on and some new scratch across the passenger side mirror. This time he said it was just for a weekend. He needed to move some tools and pick up some job material. I asked who he was working for. He gave me a vague answer about a cousin of a friend and a couple of properties on the north side. That should have been enough warning right there. Still, I said no at first. Then my mom got involved. She called me the next morning and said Caleb was really trying to get his life together. She said he was finally working steady and that I should think about how a truck could help him keep earning. She also said my dad was already frustrated with me because I was making things harder than they needed to be. That line annoyed me, but I gave in anyway because I was tired, and because I wanted to believe this was a reasonable family request instead of the beginning of something ugly. I told Caleb he could use it for one weekend only. I texted him the mileage, the fuel level, and a reminder to bring it back clean. I took pictures of the dashboard, the body, and the odometer before he left. I had never done that with family before, but something in me had started to change by then. Maybe it was just getting older. Maybe it was after one too many times of being asked to trust people who never seemed to trust me in return. Caleb brought it back 3 days later instead of 2. He apologized in that casual way he had. Like being late was just a personality trait. He thanked me. He handed me $50 for gas, which barely covered anything, but I let it go. I inspected the truck before I drove away. There was drywall dust in the bed. There was a fast food bag behind the passenger seat. The mileage was higher than he said it would be, but I told myself I was being petty. I did not yet know that was the first time I had let something slide that I should have challenged. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from my insurance company saying they needed clarification on vehicle use. At first, I thought it was a scam or a generic review. Then I saw the mileage numbers they listed. They did not make sense. According to the letter, the truck had been driven far more than my normal commute and job travel would explain. The notice was asking for verification because the mileage pattern suggested the vehicle might be used commercially in a way that had not been disclosed. My stomach dropped immediately. I called the number on the letter and spent 20 minutes on hold before a representative explained that an external report had triggered a review. She would not tell me who made it. She only said they had received usage information that did not match my declared policy. I remember staring at my kitchen table while she talked, feeling this slow, cold irritation spread through me. I told her I used the truck for work, but not as a commercial vehicle for hire. She said the discrepancy involved repeated trips that looked like contractor or delivery use, and asked whether I had anyone else driving the truck regularly. That was when I said Caleb's name. I did not accuse him then. I was still hoping there was some innocent explanation. The rep asked me to send documentation of my usage and confirm who had access to the truck. I said I would. After I hung up, I checked my email and found a message from the insurer asking for odometer photos and a use declaration. I pulled out the folder where I kept maintenance records and realized I had exactly what they wanted. That made me feel better for about 10 minutes. Then I started comparing dates. The higher mileage had happened almost entirely during the window when Caleb borrowed the truck. I checked the photos I had taken before and after. He had added a shocking amount of miles in 3 days. Too many. Way too many for the story he gave me. I texted him and asked where he had driven it. He replied with a string of vague nonsense about job sites, supply stores, and taking the long way because of traffic. I did not believe any of it. I asked for the address of the properties. He did not answer for 3 hours. When he finally did, he gave me one address and then a second one that turned out to be a vacant lot. The more I looked at it, the worse it got. I pulled up my truck's odometer from the photos and compared it against the mileage estimate he had casually mentioned earlier in conversation. It did not line up at all. Then I remembered something else. A couple of weeks after he had the truck, I had seen a payment notification on his phone when he left it on the counter at my parents' house. I had not looked closely, but I remembered the word route in the message preview. At the time, I assumed it was about a delivery gig. Now I was not so sure. The next morning, I called the insurer back and asked what exactly the flagged usage suggested. The woman on the phone was polite but careful. She said the pattern was consistent with a commercial delivery route or logbook manipulation. That phrase caught my attention. I asked if someone had submitted mileage records. She said she could not discuss third-party reports in detail, but she confirmed the issue involved mileage declarations that did not match the vehicle's actual movement. I hung up and just sat there for a while. I was angry, but more than that, I was embarrassed. I had loaned my truck to my brother. I had ignored my own instincts. Now my insurance could be affected because my family could not stop using me as the responsible one. I pulled my records together that night. Fuel receipts, oil changes, service logs, work orders that showed my routes, photos with timestamps, bank statements for gas purchases. I spent hours laying everything out on my table like I was prepping for a tax audit. The more I documented, the more convinced I became that Caleb had been using the truck for something more than errands. I did not know what yet. The answer came in a stupid, ordinary way. I was at a convenience store getting coffee before work when I saw Caleb's name on one of those app notifications on his phone while he stood in line in front of me. He had left his screen visible on the counter. I was not trying to snoop. I just noticed the name of a company that I recognized from my own work area. It was a local equipment rental outfit that also handled light deliveries for contractors. What caught my eye was the follow-up message about mileage logs and route compliance. My chest tightened. When he stepped away to grab a drink, I saw enough to know the truck had been tied to his work account. That was my first real proof that something was being set up under my vehicle without my consent. I did not confront him in the store. I went straight to work and tried to focus, but my hands were shaking every time I pulled a tool out of my van. That night I called the rental outfit from a private number and asked a few careful questions, pretending I was verifying something for a friend. The employee I reached was blunt. He said they had a contractor account tied to several deliveries and that the truck description on file matched my F-150 closely enough that they had accepted it for route verification. He also said the listed owner was Caleb, not me. Caleb. That was the moment I fully understood the shape of the lie. My brother had been using my truck, but he had somehow represented it as his own in at least one business context. I was not even angry yet. I was past angry. I was into that weirdly calm stage where your brain gets very quiet because it knows trouble is real. I went home, pulled my title, and found that the truck was still entirely in my name, exactly as I knew it was. Then I checked the insurance policy, also in my name. Then I checked the loan paperwork. Mine too. That meant the risk, the liability, and the financial exposure were all sitting on me while Caleb got the benefit. I was so stunned by the audacity of it that I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I called my dad, not to start a fight, just to ask what the hell Caleb had been doing with my truck. My dad did not sound surprised. He sounded irritated that I was calling about it at all. He said Caleb had needed something dependable for work, that I knew he was trying to get ahead, and that I should not make a big deal out of a brother helping himself out. That wording bothered me immediately. Helping himself out was a strange way to describe using someone else's property for commercial runs without permission. I asked if my dad knew Caleb had listed the truck for work use. My dad said he did not know all the details and that I was overreacting. He said if I wanted to be a good brother, I would let it go. I remember staring at my phone after that call and feeling this weird mix of disappointment and clarity. My dad was not clueless. He was choosing a side, and he was choosing Caleb's side before even hearing the facts. That was not new either. What was new was that I finally noticed it. I did not say anything to the family for a few days after that. I wanted more evidence. I wanted to understand exactly what had happened before I opened my mouth and gave them room to spin it. So I did what I always do when something does not make sense. I started collecting details. I pulled my truck's location history through the app connected to my dash cam. I checked toll records. I examined fuel purchases. I matched times against when Caleb claimed to have my truck. Then I noticed a pattern so obvious I was annoyed with myself for missing it sooner. The truck had not just been used on job sites. It had been running repeated routes across town during working hours, always in the same cluster, often with stops near warehouses and pickup points. It looked exactly like delivery work. Only Caleb had not told me he was doing delivery work. Not once. I kept digging. The dash cam also had a weak internal log because I had never bothered to disable the default storage settings. Most of the footage was useless, but enough remained to show Caleb at the wheel multiple times during hours he had claimed the truck was parked. One clip showed him loading boxed items near a strip mall. Another showed him handing something to a guy in a reflective vest in a parking lot. I still did not know what he was doing exactly, but I knew enough. I knew my truck had been used for work. I knew my name had never been on any of the accounts Caleb was tied to, and I knew somebody had been comfortable letting me take the risk while they kept the benefit. The next week was one of the worst stretches of petty, exhausting family nonsense I have ever dealt with. Caleb started texting like nothing was wrong. He asked if I had seen the cancellation notice yet, which was my first clue that he knew more than he was admitting. He said it was probably just a paperwork hiccup. He said he could explain everything if I would stop getting dramatic. That annoyed me so much I had to set my phone down. Then my mom called and said Dad was upset because I was making Caleb panic when he was trying to work. That was the phrase she used. Trying to work, as if I was somehow the obstacle. I told her Caleb had used my truck for something I had never approved. She said family should not keep score. I told her family also should not expose each other to liability without asking. She got quiet after that and changed the subject to my aunt's birthday dinner, which somehow made me even angrier. I still did not confront everybody in person. I wanted a stronger hand, so I called my own insurance agent and told him I wanted to review everything on the policy. I asked what happened if someone else had been using the truck in a way that was not listed. He did not sugarcoat it. He said if there was misrepresentation, the policy could be affected retroactively. He also said if the vehicle had been used for commercial work without proper disclosure, I needed to correct the record immediately. I asked what that meant. He said it meant I had to update the policy use, list all drivers, and provide a truthful statement about the truck's actual usage. Then he said something that I still remember clearly because it made my stomach drop again. He said if I knew of mileage reporting that had been falsified, I should not wait to address it. That was all I needed. I went home and started an actual packet. I wrote out a timeline. I listed every time Caleb had requested the truck. I attached screenshots of his texts. I attached dash cam stills. I attached my odometer photos. I attached receipts proving I had not been the one putting those miles on the truck. I also called the rental outfit back and asked for anything they had showing the truck was associated with Caleb's account. They would not give me everything, but they did confirm in writing that the vehicle had been logged under his name. That was enough for me. I sent the insurer a clean, honest summary of the situation. I explained that Caleb had used my truck without written permission for what appeared to be commercial activity. I said I had not authorized any of the mileage declarations and that any business-related use tied to my vehicle had been misrepresented. I asked them to remove me from any inaccurate reporting and correct the file immediately. I did not know if that would blow back on Caleb. I assumed it would. I was not doing it to hurt him. I was doing it because I could see the trap closing around my own finances, and I was not going to let my fear of a family argument keep me in it. A few days later, I got the cancellation notice. Not a warning, not a request for more information, a cancellation notice. The policy had been flagged and the company was moving to drop the vehicle coverage unless I confirmed the correct use and driver list. I was not surprised. I was furious but not surprised. What I did not expect was that the cancellation notice would arrive the same day Caleb texted asking if I could just sign the truck over to him before dinner so he could keep working. That phrasing was almost funny in a sick way. Not can we talk? Not could you help me understand? Not would you consider selling it? Just sign it over before dinner and be grateful. That was when I knew my dad had already been coached into making it sound like I was the obstacle again. I drove to my parents' house after work because I wanted this face-to-face. I brought the cancellation notice in my bag. I brought copies of the documents I had collected. I brought the title. I also brought the notebook where I had written down every call, every date, every mileage number, and every weird little inconsistency I had found. I was more prepared than I had ever been for a family dinner, which should tell you how bad my instincts had become. When I walked in, my dad was already acting like this was just another ordinary night. My mom had set the table. Caleb was there looking tired and annoyed in equal measure. He had that scruffy, underslept look he used when he wanted people to believe he was buried under responsibility. My dad did not even wait for us to sit down before he started talking about how Caleb had a good opportunity and how I was being selfish by clinging to a truck I did not even need as much as he did. I let him talk. That was hard. My dad hated being ignored. He kept going anyway, saying Caleb could take over the insurance and payments, that it would be cleaner for everyone, that I should help family instead of acting like a landlord. That line made my face go hot because I knew it was a lie. He was not offering to take over anything cleanly. He was trying to pressure me into transferring the truck before I had fully understood the consequences. I asked him why Caleb needed my truck so badly if he was already using it for work. Caleb jumped in then and said he had only used it a few times and that I was making a mountain out of nothing. I pulled the paperwork out of my bag and set it on the table. I did not throw it. I set it down carefully. That probably made the whole thing worse because it felt deliberate. The cancellation notice was on top. My dad looked at the envelope first, then at me. He asked what that was. I told him it was the notice from my insurer saying the policy was being canceled because the mileage and usage tied to the truck did not match what had been disclosed. Caleb immediately started talking over me. He said it had to be a mistake. He said the company must have mixed up the records. He said he had only done a few runs and that I knew about them. That was when I laid out the timeline. I explained exactly when the truck had left my possession. I showed the before and after mileage photos. I showed the screenshots where Caleb had asked to borrow it. I showed the location history from the dash cam and the route logs. I showed the rental company confirmation that the truck had been attached to Caleb's account. Then I showed the email where I had told the insurer the truth and asked them to correct the record. That was the moment my dad stopped chewing. He just stared at the paper. Caleb went red in the face almost immediately. My mom looked from one of us to the other like she was trying to decide whether not saying anything had finally become impossible. My dad asked Caleb if he had been using the truck for deliveries. Caleb mumbled something about gigs and side work. Then Dad asked whether he had listed the truck as his own. Caleb denied it in a very weak way. I could tell from his face that he was lying, and I think my dad could too. I had not expected him to crack so quickly. I had expected a bigger fight, but once the paperwork was on the table, the story collapsed. That was the satisfying part, not because I enjoyed seeing him squirm. I did not. It was satisfying, because facts are hard to argue with when they are sitting in front of you in black and white. My dad turned to me and said I should have handled this privately. I told him I had handled it privately until the insurer got involved. I told him I had given Caleb multiple chances to explain. I told him I was not going to lie to keep the peace just because he wanted dinner to be normal. That sentence landed. My dad does not like it when I call out the performance. He acts offended, but he hates it most when somebody reminds him that his version of family harmony depends on everyone else swallowing their feelings. He told me Caleb was under pressure and that I was making things harder. I told him the only reason things were hard was because somebody had treated my truck like a shared asset without asking. Then I said the part that I had been holding back for days. I told them the insurer had also asked for a truthful statement about who actually controlled the vehicle and whether the mileage records had been falsified. That made Caleb go still. He finally looked scared. Not annoyed, not defensive, actually scared. I think he had assumed I was just angry. He had not expected me to call the insurance company, document everything, and let the paper trail do the talking. My mom started crying quietly at the table, which made my dad even angrier, because now he had to manage her feelings too. He asked me why I was doing this to the family. I said I was doing it because I was tired of being the person who absorbed consequences other people created. Then I told him I had already removed my name from any future association with the truck until the policy issue was sorted. I said the insurance company had my statement. I said if Caleb wanted to keep using the truck for work, he would have to do it legally, honestly, and under his own name with his own policy. The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator kick on. That should have been the end of it, but it was only the beginning. My dad stood up too fast and shoved his chair back. He said I was punishing Caleb because I was jealous that he needed help. I remember blinking at him because the accusation was so dumb it almost reset my brain. Jealous of what exactly? Jealous that Caleb had managed to drag me into an insurance mess. Jealous that he had used my property without permission. Jealous that he had apparently lied to get work he was not ready to handle. I told him no. I told him I was not jealous. I told him I was refusing to let this be my problem anymore. Then I slid the envelope with the cancellation notice across the table toward him and said the line that had probably been stuck in his throat ever since he heard it. Too bad. I already pulled my name off everything and reported the mileage fraud. I did not raise my voice. That mattered more than people realize. If I had yelled, they could have turned it into me being unstable. If I had exploded, they could have made it about my attitude. Instead, I said it calmly enough that the words landed like a verdict. Caleb looked like somebody had punched the air out of him. My dad stared at the notice. My mom covered her mouth. And for the first time in my adult life, I think my dad genuinely did not know what to say. He tried anyway. He started talking about how family should work together and how I was creating legal trouble where there did not need to be any. I told him the legal trouble had already been created. I just refused to pretend it was not happening. That is when Caleb finally admitted enough to make the whole thing impossible to deny. He had been using my truck for deliveries through a side arrangement that he never cleared with me. He had been telling the company it was available under his own operating setup. He had been logging mileage in a way that made it look like he was covering less ground than he was. He had hoped the extra use would stay between him and the app. He said he did not think it would become a family issue. That was the closest thing to honesty I got out of him that night. He still framed it like a mistake of pressure and bad judgment. But I could hear the difference between pressure and entitlement. He had not borrowed my truck. He had leveraged my truck. He had taken something I owned and used my silence as part of the business model. My dad realized the same thing at almost the same time I did. He was angry, but now he was angry at Caleb too. That was new. Usually when my dad got cornered, he just doubled down on defending the favored kid. This time he had too much evidence sitting in front of him. The leverage was gone. That changed everything. We did not resolve it that night. No dramatic apology happened. No one hugged. No one suddenly became wise. Instead, my dad told Caleb to get his paperwork together and figure out how to clean up the mess with the company he had been working with. He told my mom to stop crying and start bringing in dessert. He told me we would talk more later. That was his way of retreating without admitting he was retreating. I drove home that night feeling hollow more than victorious. I had expected some kind of surge of relief. Instead, I felt exhausted and weirdly sad, not because I regretted standing up for myself. I did not. I was sad because I had finally learned something about my family that I could not unlearn. They were perfectly willing to let me carry the downside as long as they thought I would keep quiet about it. The aftermath was messier than the dinner. The next morning, Caleb texted me 6 times. He started with apology language and quickly moved into blame. He said he had not meant for it to go this far. He said I could have warned him before contacting the insurer. He said now he might lose work. I did not answer right away. I let him sit with it. Then I sent him one message saying I had warned him by asking what was happening with the truck. I reminded him he had lied. I reminded him that using someone else's insured vehicle for undisclosed work is not a small thing. Then I stopped replying. My mom called later in the day and asked if there was any way to make this go away. I said no. I told her the insurer had already been notified, and I was not going to retract a truthful statement so Caleb could keep cutting corners. She sounded disappointed in me, which hurt more than I expected. My mom has always had a way of making you feel guilty without ever directly asking for anything. I recognized it too late in life to be comfortable. A few days after the dinner, I got a call from the insurer asking a few follow-up questions. They wanted confirmation of my statement and a few more details about who had accessed the truck. I answered everything carefully. The representative said the company was reviewing whether any part of the policy had been compromised, but because I had been proactive and honest, I was in a much better position than if I had waited. That told me two things. One, I had done the right thing. Two, if I had let Caleb and my dad bully me into staying quiet, I might have been on the hook for all of it. That thought made me furious all over again. I also got a letter from the rental outfit saying Caleb's account was under review for inaccurate vehicle information. That one made me wince because it meant he was getting hit from both sides. Still, I did not feel triumphant. I just felt done. A week later, my dad asked me to stop by alone. I expected another argument. Instead, he looked tired. He was not softened exactly, but he had the defeated posture of somebody who had spent too long pretending the obvious was not obvious. He said Caleb had shown him some of the messages. He said he had not realized how much the truck was being used. He said he thought it was mostly local and minor. That was an interesting way to describe somebody using another man's insured vehicle for a business arrangement without permission. I did not interrupt him. He then admitted, in the closest thing to a real apology I have ever gotten from him, that he should not have told me to sign the truck over before dinner. He said he had been trying to solve a problem too quickly. That was dad language, for I was wrong. I accepted it for what it was. I did not push him for more because I knew better by then. He also said Caleb would be handling his own transportation from now on. I asked whether Caleb understood that meant no more truck, no more assumptions, and no more borrowing without permission. Dad nodded. I believed him enough to be cautious. The practical side of all this took longer to untangle. I had to spend time with the insurer clarifying my policy use so my own coverage would stay clean. I had to update my records. I had to make sure my truck was not tagged with any remaining business association that I had not approved. I ended up taking it to my own agent in person with the binder of documents I had assembled. She went through everything line by line. She actually complimented my record keeping, which felt absurd after the stress of the whole thing. But that binder saved me. The timestamps, receipts, odometer photos, and service records proved I had not been hiding anything. If I had just talked about it casually, I probably would have sounded guilty. Because that is what guilt sounds like. Details are what saved me. The other consequence was with Caleb himself. For about 2 months, he barely spoke to me. He was angry because he lost the convenience. He was embarrassed because the family knew enough to stop pretending. He was also, I think, rattled by the possibility that somebody else might finally make him answer for things instead of smoothing them over. I did not chase him. I did not send long messages. I did not ask the rest of the family to mediate. That was another new thing for me. I let the silence stand. Then, eventually, he asked if we could meet at a diner near the highway. I went because I wanted to hear whether he had anything useful to say when he was not protected by my dad. He looked older somehow, or maybe just less confident. He admitted he had been using the truck for side work because he had gotten behind and thought he could catch up fast. He said the mileage situation spiraled because he had underreported how much he was driving and did not want me to freak out. That part was almost believable, except for the fact that hiding it from me was the entire problem. He said he did not think the company would care as long as the work got done. I told him that was exactly how people end up with insurance problems and legal problems and no truck. He nodded, but I could tell he still did not fully grasp how close he had come to dragging me into something much worse. I also made one thing very clear. If he ever needed help again, he had to ask first and be honest about what he was using my property for. No more vague stories. No more assuming my yes. No more treating me like a safety net that he could quietly pull on whenever he wanted. He actually agreed. Whether that was because he meant it or because he was too tired to fight, I do not know. Maybe both. The money side ended up being better for me than I expected. Because I caught it early and documented everything, my insurer did not treat me like a fraudster. I had to pay a bit more to keep the policy clean after the review, but I did not get canceled outright, and I did not get stuck covering a hidden commercial problem that should never have been mine. That alone would have been worth the months of stress. But there was another unexpected result. I became much more careful about every single thing connected to my truck and my finances. I started using mileage logs for my own work, not because I was in trouble, but because I finally understood how easily small sloppiness can turn into a huge problem when someone else is willing to lie. I also stopped lending out anything important unless I was ready to lose it. That sounds harsh, but it is really just adult math. A month after the dinner, my dad tried to joke about the whole thing at a family barbecue, not a real joke. One of those half-smirking comments people make when they want everyone to pretend the tension is gone. He said something about me being the family accountant now. Nobody laughed. That was the second most satisfying moment for me. Not because they were uncomfortable, because the room had changed. Before, my dad could say something like that and everybody would automatically join in. This time my aunt looked at him like he was being inappropriate. My mom changed the subject immediately. Caleb got up to bring drinks inside. It was subtle, but I could feel it. The family had started learning that I was not going to rescue them from the consequences of their own shortcuts. That shift mattered more than any apology. A few months later, Caleb got a legitimate job with a local HVAC company. Real paycheck, real hours, real truck of his own eventually, though he had to finance a used one with his own name on the paperwork and pay a stupidly high rate because of the mess on his record. He complained about it once, and I told him plainly that the higher rate existed because lenders hate surprises. He did not argue. I do not think he liked hearing that from me, but he heard it. My mom also changed a little, not dramatically. She still hates conflict. She still sometimes slips into guilt language, but she stopped asking me to be the one to smooth everything over. That felt like progress. My dad took longer. He is not suddenly a different person. He still gets stubborn. He still likes being the man in charge in his own head. But he has not asked me to sign over anything since then. He has also not told me to be grateful for having my property used against me. That alone counts as growth in our family. As for me, I learned that calm is not the same as passive. I used to think staying quiet made me easier to live with. What it actually did was teach people they could push until I finally snapped. This time I stayed calm, but I also prepared. I kept records. I checked the paperwork. I reported the fraud instead of pretending I had not seen it. I did not win because I out-argued them at dinner. I won because the truth was stronger than their pressure, and I had enough proof to let it speak for itself. That is the part I think about most now. Not the yelling, not the table, not my dad's face when he realized I had already handled the insurance issue before he got the chance to bully me into silence. I think about how long I let my family confuse obedience with love. I think about how close I came to signing away the only leverage I had just to keep a bad dinner from getting awkward. I think about how often people like my dad count on the quieter person to surrender first. I did not. The truck is still mine. The policy is clean. My name is off anything I did not authorize. Caleb pays for his own mistakes now. My dad still acts like I made a scene, but he says it a lot less confidently than before. And every once in a while, when I am driving home from work with the bed empty and the tank half full and nobody trying to take advantage of it, I remember that dinner and how strange it felt to finally put the paper down and stop apologizing for the truth. It did not fix my family, nothing that clean ever does, but it changed my position in it. I am no longer the easy one. I am no longer the one who signs before dinner just to keep everybody comfortable. I am the one who reads the notice first. I am the one who keeps the receipts. And I am the one who learned the hard way that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let the facts embarrass the people who were counting on your silence.